The most famous giant in history is Goliath from the Bible. He was a champion of the Philistine camp, known for fighting as an armored warrior. A man named Goliath of Gath stepped out in front of the Philistine ranks, standing an impressive 9 feet and 9 inches tall, 1 Samuel 17:4. At first glance, it is hard to grasp his size due to the ancient measurements in cubits and spans, which don't align with our current use of feet and inches. To put it simply, Goliath was a massive man. Considering the reach of his arms when raised above his head, it's easy to imagine the intimidating figure he must have been. What do you think Goliath's height was? Leave your answer in the comments. The impression of giantism has surrounded the Nephilim for centuries, catalyzing human imagination and curiosity. However, my experience suggests that most people are unaware of the true story behind these beings and how they influenced biblical history. If you are eager to uncover the truth, you've come to the right place. By continuing to watch this video, you will learn about the origin of the Nephilim, their influence on biblical history, and how they are connected to Goliath and his brothers. The story of the Nephilim goes back to the time of the flood, when early humans and gods cohabited the earth. During this time, the human gods, or angels, began to interbreed with the daughters of men, producing offspring with superhuman abilities and strength. These beings were called Nephilim, and they were known for their great stature and power. The Bible refers to them as giants, alongside other supernatural beings such as the Anakim and Rephaim. However, the story of the Nephilim is not simply reduced to a list of names and deeds. It is intrinsically linked to the story of Abraham and the saga of the Israelites. According to sacred records, the Nephilim were very powerful and were feared because of their war abilities and their capability to provide territory and resources. The Israelites, in turn, were a tribe that had been chosen by God to inherit the Promised Land. The relationship between the Nephilim and the Israelites was marked by conflict and disputes. The Nephilim were the children of the human gods and the daughters of men, while the Israelites were the descendants of the flood and the chosen of God. This difference in origin and religion created an interesting conflict, as the Nephilim were seen as a threat to divine authority, and biblical scholars identify the Nephilim as a kind of human beings who, according to the narrative, were generated by the union between fallen angels and the daughters of men. This phenomenon is described in the book of Genesis, in chapter 6, in verses that describe God's wrath against the world at a time when human beings were multiplying excessively. The biblical account records that the angels who had descended to earth united with the daughters of men, provoking the creation of a race of giants known as the Nephilim. It's important to note that the Nephilim were not only giants in size, but also seemed to have a singular nature, different from normal human beings. They were described as having superior strength and agility, and also as having knowledge and wisdom of their own. The Bible describes that they built large cities and developed advanced practices of agriculture and construction. Many biblical scholars interpret the Nephilim as a metaphor for the race of people who lived at that time, who combined human and divine characteristics. Others argue that the Nephilim were a historical reality, but that the Bible does not provide enough information to better understand their behaviors and characteristics. However, the biblical accounts about the Nephilim are very interesting, as they provide a unique insight into humanity and divine interference in history. The narrative of the Nephilim can be seen as an example of the struggle between good and evil, between God and the creatures who opposed his will. The Bible presents us with a look at human history, showing how humans interacted with God and understood him. The meaning of the Nephilim goes beyond the biblical narrative and assumes an important role in mythology and spirituality. They are mentioned. The Nephilim begins with the rebellion of the fallen angels, who desired to have children with the daughters of men. This union resulted in the creation of beings with superhuman abilities, but also a tragic destiny. According to the Bible, the fallen angels, led by Lucifer, rebelled against God after being created to worship and praise the Lord. They desired to achieve a status equal to God and take his place in the universe. This rebellion was condemned by God, who expelled them from heaven and threw them upon the earth, where they became the fallen angels, also known as demiurges. However, before being expelled, they had sexual relations with the daughters of men, resulting in the creation of the Nephilim. This union between angels and humans was considered an abomination by God, as it violated the order of the universe and challenged divine authority. The Nephilim are often described as giants with strength and skill that exceed those of normal men. They were known for their supernatural abilities, such as their strength, speed, and resistance. Some legends report that the Nephilim also had abilities for prescience, telepathy, and other psychic powers. However, these abilities did not make them immortal, and they were banished from the human world after the flood sent by God. The presence of the Nephilim on earth also brought a curse, as God considered this union an abomination. This curse was passed on to future generations and caused suffering and conflict among humans. In addition, the presence of the Nephilim also destabilized the natural order of the world, leading to a period of chaos and violence. The result was the flood, which destroyed the earth and eliminated the Nephilim. The Bible. The Book of Gadawa presents a fascinating view of the story of the Nephilim and their relationship with Goliath and his brothers. To better understand this story, it is essential to have knowledge about the Bible, more specifically the book of Genesis, chapter 6, where the origin of the Nephilim is found. In this chapter, the story of God creating human beings in his image is narrated, but also of how the sons of men married the daughters of angels, which generated the Nephilim. This story is fundamental to understanding the nature of the Nephilim and their relationship with God. In addition, it is important to know that the Nephilim were considered beings of evil, and their presence on earth caused the great flood, which was provoked by God to destroy humanity. To advance in understanding the story of the Nephilim, it is useful to explore the mythology of the time, including the stories of the Sumerian giants. These stories can be found in ancient texts such as the Epic of Gilgamesh, which talks about King Gilgamesh and his fight against the giants. In addition, it is interesting to note that Sumerian mythology also presents results about the destruction of humanity by God. At the same time, it is essential to analyze the relationship between the Nephilim and God. According to the Bible, God saw that humanity was more corrupt than before and decided to send a flood to destroy the earth and all its creatures. However, Noah and his family were saved because they were righteous in the eyes of God. Among the many questions that arise about the story of the Nephilim is the question of the origin of the Sumerian giants. According to Sumerian mythology, the giants were created by God to serve men, but they became rebellious and began to cause problems on earth. However, the Bible presents a different view of the story of the Nephilim. Still recently, the hypothesis of creatures with superhuman abilities arose as a result of the interpretation of biblical stories. In particular, the narrative of the Nephilim, which resulted in the creation of beings with superhuman abilities, but also with a tragic destiny. Recent studies suggest that the Nephilim may have been inspired by mythical creatures of the time, such as the giants of Sumerian mythology, who were described as possessing enormous strength and intelligence. Brian Godawa, a respected author, explores the origin of the Nephilim and their influence on biblical history in his book, The Sons of the Gods. He argues that the Nephilim were created as a result of the rebellion of the fallen angels, who decided to abandon their condition as celestial beings and become human beings. This rebellion, according to Godawa, brought a curse upon humanity, making it inferior to the point of becoming subject to the wills of fallen angels. The legends of the Nephilim also mention the creation of human beings by the gods, such as the description in Genesis 6:2-4, which speaks of the union between the sons of men and the daughters of gods. This union, which resulted in the creation of the Nephilim, became an affront to God and contributed to the destruction of humanity. However, the question is, why were the Nephilim created, and why did God allow them to exist? According to the Bible, God saw the evil that dwelled in the hearts of human beings and, as a consequence, decided to destroy the earth with a flood. However, before the destruction, God allowed some human beings to survive, some of whom were children of the Nephilim. The presence of the Nephilim on earth brought many negative consequences. They were powerful and intelligent, which made them a threat to humanity. They eliminated the Nephilim, a race of giant mentors committed to introducing advanced war and engineering techniques to humanity. However, to sufficiently understand the story of Goliath and his brothers, it is essential to know them better. Goliath, one of the few Nephilim who survived the devastating flood that cleansed the earth, is a legendary character mentioned in the Old Testament. He is described as a giant leader of the Philistines, one of the most influential nations in the Middle East at the time. The figure of Goliath is closely linked to that of the Nephilim, whose story is told in the book of Genesis. According to the Bible, this race of giants arose after the man Cain married his sister, who bore him a son, Enoch. This was the father of Irad, who betrayed God and consequently led to the creation of the Nephilim. The Nephilim, for the most part, were children of fallen angels who united with the daughters of men. This happened after the fall of the angels, also known in the Bible as the rebellion of Lucifer. This story is contextualized by several inspired texts, including the Book of Enoch and the Apocalypse of Baruch. According to these texts, the angels who united with the daughters of men had divine power and knowledge, which allowed their descendants to become too wise and strong for men. Goliath, as leader of the Philistines, is famous for having challenged the army of Israel, led by Saul, during the War of the Philistines. However, it was a young shepherd named David who defeated him with the help of God. The fight of David against Goliath is celebrated in Hebrew literature as a feat of courage and faith, demonstrating that not even a powerful giant like Goliath was capable. In addition to courses that focused on providing an overview of the history of the Nephilim, it is important to seek courses that offer a deeper and more detailed approach to this fascinating biblical issue. These courses may include critical analyses of biblical narratives, discussions about the interpretation of relevant passages, and historical contextualization of the time in which the Nephilim allegedly lived. To better understand the influence of the Nephilim on biblical history, a deeper understanding of the society and religion of Israel at the time of the Old Testament is needed. Courses that address this issue may include studies on the culture and literature of the ancient Near East, the religion and theology of Israel, and the political and social history of the period. The courses may also evaluate the apocryphal and non-biblical literature that refers to the Nephilim, including texts such as the Book of Enoch and the Ethiopian Bible. These texts can offer valuable insights into the influence of the Nephilim on biblical history and can help to elucidate the traditional image of the Nephilim as soulless giants. In addition, the courses may include the analysis of texts such as the Book of Genesis and the Book of Jude, which record the tragedy of the Nephilim and the subsequent eradication of the race. These analyses may include discussions on the narrative and the tension between ethics and morality in both passages. Beyond textual analysis, The courses may include studies on the iconography and art of the ancient Near East that refers to the Nephilim, as well as studies on mythology and comparative religion. This can help to offer a broader and more contextualized view of the influence of the Nephilim on biblical history. It is important to note that the Nephilim are not only a figure from the Bible, but also an issue that has been the subject of study and debate by researchers. And the impression of giantism has surrounded the Nephilim for centuries, catalyzing human imagination and curiosity. However, my experience suggests that most people are unaware of the true story behind these beings and how they influenced biblical history. Silence and ignorance are often replaced by speculation and superstition, leading many people to believe in myths and legends about the origin and characteristics of the Nephilim. On the contrary, through a scientific and rigorous approach, it is possible to unravel the true nature of these beings and their relationship with humanity. The history of the Nephilim begins long before the creation of the Holy Book in ancient Egypt, where scribes recorded the existence of gigantic beings similar to gods who ruled over cities and provinces. These beings, known as the child gods, were worshipped and feared by humans, and their influence on Egyptian politics and society was profound. Although the Nephilim are often associated with the Bible, it is important to note that the Holy Book is not the only text that mentions them. Other sources, such as Assyrian and Hittite records, also mention the existence of gigantic beings who stood between humans and gods. The influence of the Nephilim on biblical history is significant, as they are the main antagonists of the Jewish patriarchs, such as Noah, Abraham, and Moses, and their presence marks the passage from an era of hope and confidence to an era of fear and despair. My experience suggests that most people are unaware of the true nature of the Nephilim and their connection to humanity. Often people confuse the Nephilim with the giants mentioned in the Book of Esther, or with the sons of God, who appear in the Book of Genesis. However, the story of the Nephilim is not simply a list of names and deeds, as it is intrinsically linked to the history of Abraham and the saga of the Israelites, constituting an intriguing and obscure chapter in the Bible. According to sacred records, the Nephilim were fantastic beings, also known as the sons of men and deities, who possessed unique and extraordinary abilities, such as the ability to carry out brutal and bloody wars, and to provide territory and resources on a vast scale. According to biblical tradition, the Nephilim emerged during the period of parthenogenesis, a time when the sons of God connected with the daughters of men, generating these powerful and formidable beings. In contrast, the Israelites were a tribe that had been chosen by God to inherit the Promised Land, and they were known for their devotion and obedience to God. The relationship between the Nephilim and the Israelites was marked by constant conflict and struggles. According to the Book of Genesis, the Nephilim were destroyed by God during the Night of the Giants, a global cataclysm that marked the end of the Bronze Age and the transition to the Golden Age of the Pilgrims. However, the legend of the Nephilim persisted and was transposed into pagan and folkloric legends, where they were portrayed as unique and magnificent beings with supernatural powers and warlike abilities. The narrative of the Nephilim is also linked to the figure of Melchizedek, a blessed king who is mentioned in the Book of Genesis as the king of Sodom and its cities. According to the narrative, Melchizedek received Abram, the Israelite patriarch, after his victory over the kings of the region. If you have come this far, it is because you are truly interested in better understanding the Bible and the mythical history that surrounds us. Therefore, it is essential that you understand the true story behind the Nephilim, including Goliath and his brothers. By exploring this fascinating history, you can learn more about the Bible and the mythical history that surrounds us. If you enjoyed the content presented,